And speaking of newsrooms and writing and all that kind of smart stuff, we have someone who I have just a tremendous amount of respect for and admiration for the work that she's done, and that's Michelle Doster, who is one of our local American authors and public historians, and very well known by many people as the one that's holding on to the legacy of her great grandmother, Ida B. Wells. Good morning, Michelle, and welcome to Choose Views.
Good morning, Richard.
Thanks
for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. How are you doing this morning?
I am good. I'm good.
Woke up to some rain this morning a little bit. How about that?
Yeah, well, we need rain.
Yes, we do.
But not too much.
But not too much. Just enough to keep the grass growing and the trees from shedding too soon. But guys, you get an opportunity to meet people and talk with people that have done some things that you don't even know about until you start talking to them. And Michelle is one of those folks that has been writing since high school and into college and all of that. But of late, she's really had two phenomenal articles that I want you guys to check out. One of them is I Survived the RNC, Observations on MAGA World from a Progressive Black Chicago Woman. And that was an article that Michelle wrote and posted Rebellious Magazine for Women back in mid-August. And then the latest great article, which was just posted a couple of weeks ago, and it's called DNC, Family Reunion Feels, Nods to Trailblazers, and a Focus on Moving Forward. So my first question, which is probably going to be the question of the day, is, or in part, what was it like being at the RNC back in August? Or actually, it was in late July, right?
Right. It was in July. Well, the conventions are 4 days, and so for the RNC, I went for 2 days. So I experienced half of the convention, and since it's in Milwaukee, I live in Chicago. I felt like it was important for me to go up there since it was a drive. And I didn't really know what to expect. I did sort of anticipate maybe, being sort of questioned or sort of given side eyes of why I was there, what I was doing. I mean, that's what I anticipated. And so I made a decision to wear attire that I thought would make me fit in. And it's just interesting to me when I think back on it that I felt the need to fit in. And so I was very deliberate about what I wore. And so for both days, I wore a different red shirt for both days. And it was very much the MAGA red. And one day I wore a baseball cap that was the same MAGA red, but it had Jesus Christ stitched on the front, which I thought would fit in. And the next day I had on a baseball cap that had the American flag motif. And so, so that was my way of, sort of wearing something that I thought would make me look like I belonged. And that's it. So I didn't know what to expect, but I thought that would help. Mm-hmm. And what struck me the most, sort of almost confusing or just unanticipated experience was that everybody that I came in contact with was very friendly. It was very warm. People were chatting with me. I went to all the different booths that they had of different organizations. You know how it is at conferences or conventions that there are different booths. And so I went to all of them, and I went to the exhibits and everything, and I struck up conversations with people. I mean, they knew I was pressed because I had on a press badge. So mm-hmm. It wasn't like I was pretending like I wasn't pressed. But overall, it was very friendly. People. It was very kind of an upbeat, sort of party-like atmosphere. I struck up conversations with people when I was eating lunch, and I went to a bar and I had a beer with a group of people, and I was just kind of blending in and fitting in and just talking to people.
So what were some of the conversations that you had? I mean, I know that's another broad question, but in the conversations that you had, what were the things that people were really talking about when you were hanging out and encountering?
I try to keep the conversation light. And so with one group of people, they were delegates from a particular state. And so I just started asking them questions about their state. Like if I can only visit one time, like what would they recommend that I go? Where would I go? Like as a tourist, what were the most exciting things to see? Things like that. So it was just kind of chit chat. I didn't try to delve into, like deep political kind of conversations. And then like outside of the perimeter, there were vendors that had tents and things like that. And so I got in conversation with this one lady who was selling books that were written, or there were two books. One was, I think, a book of poems or letters, and another was a book of artwork by people who were who have been imprisoned or incarcerated because they participated in January 6th. And so she was telling me that they're innocent, that they're just citizens, that were concerned about the integrity of the election. And then she kept talking, and she told me that she was there at the January 6th. And so we kind of got into a conversation about, making sure that elections are fair, that, votes are counted. And I kind of was like, well, if elections go a certain way, then maybe at some point Democrats might start thinking that elections are stolen. So how can we make sure that both sides feel that they're fair? And so we kind of got into an interesting conversation about that. So it was, I tried to keep it light because I didn't want to put myself in any kind of peril.
Well, and that's one of the concerns that I had for the folks here from WCPT that went up from our engineers, from management, and Patty Vasquez, who were there to just make sure. I had fingers crossed that these guys are going to be okay in that environment because they were representing, WCPT. But I'll pivot now to compare and contrast about your other article that you wrote entitled DNC Family Reunion Feels, Nods to Trailblazers, and a Focus on Moving Forward. So from your perspective, then you know that we can have certain inherent biases because of where we sit politically and socially and all that. But tell us what your experience was from your perspective doing what you do professionally from being at the DNC.
Well, so what I tried to do with both articles was basically stick with what the experience of attending was like for me personally as a Black woman. So I wasn't trying to, report word for word what people said in their speeches or keep it unbiased. I wanted to, sort of communicate to the audience of what it felt like to be in these spaces. And so at the DNC, since I am an African-American woman, I'm from Chicago, and the DNC was here in Chicago, my hometown. Obviously, it felt like home in more than one way. The huge, stark differences that I noticed between the two conventions was, first of all, the DNC was extraordinarily racially diverse. And also, I think, religiously diverse, because when they had the invocations, they had a Christian person and I think a Muslim person give the invocation. So that was, diversity right there. The other thing at the DNC, the RNC was very Christian focused. a lot of the people that I spoke with at the booths and at, for the different organizations that were represented there, there was a very, very strong focus on sort of Christian values and Christian everything. And so I felt that there was not tolerance for religious diversity at the RNC. In a lot of the speeches, I'm sure people can watch on YouTube, a lot of the speeches that people gave, invoked Christian scriptures and references to Jesus and all of these things. It was very, very religious focused, and the DNC felt more open to different types of religions, different thought processes, even if you're agnostic or atheist or whatever, So overall, the DNC felt more welcoming to diversity, and it was very obvious just being there. I mean, it was extremely diverse as far as the people who attended. I venture to guess that it was at least 50% people of color, at the very least. And then within the groups, there were very obviously, at the RNC, it was the American flag everywhere. Everything was red, white, and blue. People were draped themselves in the flag as far as actually how they dressed. Wearing capes with the flag, wearing, huge jackets, and everything was flag, patriot, and the RNC was there were a lot of references visually to guns. I didn't see that at the DNC as far as the merchandise. And the DNC, there were every flag. I mean, there was a pride flag, flying in a lot of places. I didn't see one at the RNC. So in all ways, the DNC was more diverse. It was more welcoming to different types of lifestyles, different ethnic groups, different religions, everything like that. So I feel like the DNC to me represented what the United States is. And the RNC represented what some people would like to think this country can potentially be, which it never has been. They're pining for a country that never existed.
Wow. That never existed. Wow. And it's interesting that you made I listened to the tone of your voice and the tenor change as you were describing the differences as it relates to diverse feeling in terms of racially, in terms of religion. And one area that you we're about to touch on was gender as it relates to the LGBTQ community. And I could hear that excitement, but some of it, to your point, is it was a home game for those of us who are from Chicago or from the region at large, that were able to take advantage of it being local, and kind of nice that, for those of us that are in this space, that the RNC was only 90 miles away, so you were able to drive there, like you said. The question that I would ask you, again, going back to some of the points that you just made about the differences, some of them grand and some of them subtle, is how do you think Chicago represented itself in this during the convention?
Oh, I think Chicago did a great job. There was a section at the RNC called Dempalooza, which was in a huge area, huge room, where there were, I think, over 100 vendors, local vendors.
There were. I mean, not to cut you off. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, and so that was a big difference between the RNC and the DNC. The RNC had a lot of vendors, but they were all it kind of reminded me of Taste of Chicago, as far as how it was outside, and there were a lot of tents, and there were picnic tables, and people could kind of sit outside, and it was like a outdoor festival kind of thing. But number-wise, I'm sure that there were more vendors at the DNC because it was inside of McCormick Place, and I just looked at the poster that had all the listings of the vendors. I don't know. There were so many I didn't count, but I think at least 70. And then there were other vendors or other organizations that were not necessarily selling products, but they were representing organizations. And so you could pick up brochures about what they were doing. So I'm pretty sure combined it was around 100. And so I thought that the DNC did a good job of making it possible for local organizations and companies to have, space to sell their wares and sell their services and things. Like there were tour companies, for instance, that were there to sell their services. So, and then at the DNC, there was a huge reception for media before the convention started, and there were a lot of vendors at the reception that had their food, available. So I thought it was a good way. I mean, it showcased local businesses. I saw some vendors that I know are small businesses on the south side of Chicago, and I was so happy to see them, have that opportunity to have their services available to the world, because people were here from all over the world for the as the media.
And that's the other part, going back to what you said about the diversity. But yes, people at the United Center, and I was at both, like you were, both at McCormick Place to take part in Dimpalooza, which was fantastic. And like you, got to see some of our old head friends and some hugs and some high fives and all that there. And see so many of the wonderful businesses. And I think your colleague, Mr. Why am I drawing a blank on his name now? That runs the Bronzeville restaurant. Yes, he was there, and we had a chance to chat. So there were a number of folks that were there that are local and regional at the Dimpalooza, and a lot of the caucuses that were held there, which was fantastic. And I know that you attended a couple of events on Sunday night, which were great kickoffs to the week. And then at the convention itself, it was a head on the swivel kind of thing, where there were people that you saw that you knew and people that you saw that you've seen, and all the rest, both in the media that were politicos. So it was a great event. And I think that, as I said, that the next day and during the days that I was there, that the city really did show itself well. And you being one of the folks that were able to cover it like you did, have really posted a great article that folks should read and become aware of. So I appreciate you for both of the ones that you posted and all that, but certainly the one on the DNC and the family reunion feeling that it had, because it was quite an event. Quite an event. So what's next, Michelle? What are you working on next that we should be talking about and promoting and making sure that people are following your work? What are you working on that's going to be coming out anytime soon?
Well, so some people might know about there's an Ida B. Wells National Monument at 3729 South Langley, which is on the land where the Ida B. Wells homes stood in Bronzeville for over 60 years. That monument was created by a world-renowned sculptor named Richard Hunt, who is a Chicago born and raised artist. And he passed away last December, unfortunately, but he lived a nice long life. He was 88 years old. And so happy that he, was able to get the project done. It was installed in 2021. And so what I'm working on now is a couple of projects to make sure that Richard Hunt is remembered and uplifted as a Chicago treasure. He really was. But I think he kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people. But I think it's important for people to know who Richard was. And so I was involved in having an honorary street named for him on Lil Avenue, which is where where he worked at his studio for over 50 years. So the honorary street is on Lil between Sheffield and Racine. And that was unveiled a couple of weeks ago. His birthday was September 12th. And so I'm working on some other projects to help uplift him. One is an article which will be coming out sometime in the next couple of weeks to summarize who he was and what he meant to the city. And, you know, the fact that the city did decide to honor him with an honorary street name, I don't know how many people have been involved in that type of initiative, but it's actually not very easy to get somebody honored by the city. So it's a big deal.
That's great.
For the city of Chicago to make that decision to honor somebody. And then my other initiative that is a dream of mine and hopefully will become a reality is to have a large-scale mural created of Richard, again, because he deserves it, but also I'm very much focused on representation of African Americans in public spaces, and there's not enough of it. And Chicago really does need to honor our hometown heroes in larger than life ways. So those are a couple of projects that I'm working on. There's other things, but yeah, but those are the two main, more immediate projects that I'm working on.
That's exciting. I take this the right way. I always love your enthusiasm and your energy about the work that you are, the things that you're working on. So it's infectious and it's in a good way, and I appreciate that in you. Michelle, I'm going to have you back on as we get closer to, and you and I'll communicate as to how these things are unfolding with the projects that you're working on, and anything that I can do through the show to promote that and draw attention to it. I definitely will raise my hand to be a participant in that. So we appreciate the work that you're doing and you've done. How can folks find you as we wrap up the segment today?
Well, they can learn more about me on my website, which is MLD as in dollar, rights, WRITES.com. And then on social media, it's Michelle Duster on X and Instagram, and on Facebook, it's at MLD Rights. So excellent. I'm on social media. It's not that hard to find me.
Sometimes one of the easiest ways to find anybody anywhere is just to Google their name and everything pops up. So I always like to ask, but I know that the easiest way sometimes is just say, go to Google this person's name, and you'll find out wherever they are and what they're working on. So it's great to have you with us this morning. Michelle, thank you for taking some time out of your busy day and letting us chat you up about all that you're working on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And have a good rest of the day.
I will. You too, Michelle. Keep up that giggle. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye now. There you go, guys. Michelle Duster, American author and public historian, getting it done here in the city of Chicago. You want to follow her, Google her name, Michelle with 2 L's, Duster, Duster, and Google her and find out what she's working on. She's done great work here in the city of Chicago. She's one of our quiet Chicago heroes, Alex. Michelle is a great writer, and she writes about things that are the history of Chicago, the greater Midwest, and the influence of African American citizens here in the city and the area. So check her out.